Greetings to Sleep Theories, the platform where we investigate some of the most fascinating concepts and hidden agendas in a soothing and contemplative manner, ideal for unwinding and drifting into slumber. This evening, we are setting out on an expedition into one of the most persistent and enigmatic conspiracies in history, the potential existence of the Illuminati. Prior to our commencement, I wish to invite you to leave a remark below stating your location and the current hour. It is remarkable to contemplate how we are all linked through these narratives and concepts. If you appreciate these stimulating investigations, kindly subscribe to Sleep Theories so that we may persist in delivering these meditative stories. Now, make yourself comfortable, locate a relaxed posture, and permit your creativity to roam as we immerse ourselves in the shadowy realm of covert fraternities and concealed authorities. It was a tranquil evening when Sarah initially encountered the conspiracy. She had been navigating her preferred discussion board, a digital sanctuary where individuals from diverse backgrounds communicated their fascination regarding unresolved puzzles, historical riddles, and the periodic untamed hypothesis. Most evenings, the subjects were light-hearted dialogues concerning renowned thefts, the presence of extraterrestrial life, or speculations regarding vanished societies. These were Sarah's confidential indulgences, an opportunity to escape the ordinary cadence of her existence. However, that specific night, a solitary thread halted her mid-navigation. Its title, documented in intense characters, stated, "The Illuminati hiding in plain sight." Her curiosity piqued. Sarah selected the thread, not anticipating much. The Illuminati. Obviously, she had perceived the terminology previously. Who had not? It was a word that appeared to exist upon the borders of standard society, murmured about within melody lyrics, ridiculed upon late-night talk shows, and hinted at within the cryptic hand signals of celebrities. To Sarah, it had continuously been more of a meme than a reality, a fantastical concept excessively bizarre to be accepted seriously. However, there was something regarding the manner the title was expressed, something intentional that caused her to pause. It was not presented as a joke. It was an inquiry, a challenge to contemplate what she might have neglected. The primary publication was not flashy or theatrical. Instead, it was remarkably calculated, nearly scholarly. Documented by a participant who identified themselves truth seeker, it illustrated years of investigation into the Illuminati, a name that generated visions of shadowed individuals within darkened chambers, organizing the pathway of the world. Truth Seeker's storyline was not regarding bizarre statements of alien overlords or magical ceremonies. Instead, it depicted the Illuminati as a highly structured collective, delicate in its influence but pervasive in its reach. Corresponding to Truth Seeker, the Illuminati was not merely a relic of history, a secret society originated in 18th century Bavaria. It was alive and well, wielding immense impact over governance, entertainment, finance, and global events. Sarah was skeptical, obviously. She had heard conspiracy theories before, and most of them collapsed under scrutiny. But something about Truth Seeker's approach caught her attention. The post was meticulously detailed, filled with links to obscure documents, photographs of architectural symbols, and a web of connections between powerful figures that seemed almost too intricate to dismiss. This was not a haphazard collection of wild accusations. It was a narrative woven with care, each piece of evidence presented as an invitation to dig deeper. Truth Seeker began with history, grounding their argument in facts that Sarah could verify. The Illuminati, they explained, was founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a Bavarian professor of canon law. Originally, it was an intellectual movement, a society of thinkers and visionaries dedicated to the ideals of reason, science, and freedom from oppressive institutions. Weishaupt's vision was noble, even radical for its time. But according to Truth Seeker, the organization's original purpose was eventually corrupted. Over the years, the Illuminati transformed from a society of enlightenment into a clandestine group focused on one goal: power. The post continued, outlining how the Illuminati supposedly dissolved in the late 18th century after being outlawed by the Bavarian government. Truth Seeker claimed that this was only the official story. In reality, the group had simply gone underground, adapting to the changing world while maintaining its grip on the levers of influence. Truth Seeker pointed to connections between Illuminati symbols and modern institutions: the all-seeing eye on the US dollar bill, the pyramid, the number 13. To Sarah, these connections initially seemed coincidental, but the way Truth Seeker laid them out made her second-guess her assumptions. The post didn't stop at symbols. Truth Seeker provided photos of famous landmarks adorned with strange recurring patterns: triangles hidden in cathedral windows, sunbursts carved into government buildings, and intricate mosaics in corporate logos. Truth Seeker described these as breadcrumbs, symbols left in plain sight as a form of control or even mockery. The idea was unsettling. Were these designs meaningless, or had she been blind to a hidden language her whole life? The deeper Sarah read, the more she began to question her own perceptions. Truth Seeker mentioned specific events in history, revolutions, economic collapses, wars, that seemed, when viewed through this lens, to follow a disturbing pattern. Powerful figures across centuries, from monarchs to billionaires, were linked by their affiliations, their philanthropy, or their mysterious public statements. Truth Seeker hinted at a shadow network, invisible yet omnipresent, orchestrating the rise and fall of leaders, the ebb and flow of economies, and even the cultural shifts that define generations. By the time Sarah reached the end of the post, she felt a strange mix of skepticism and intrigue. Truth Seeker's parting words echoed in her mind: "The truth is hidden in plain sight. Don't dismiss the signs. Look closer." That night, as she tried to sleep, Sarah found herself replaying moments from her own life. Had she ever noticed symbols in her city? Had a celebrity interview or a corporate logo ever struck her as odd? For the first time, she began to wonder if the world she thought she knew was only a facade, a carefully constructed reality designed to obscure the truth. But the question lingered: if the Illuminati did exist, what was their endgame? And why would they leave clues for people like her to find? She started with the basics. The Illuminati, she learned, was founded in Bavaria in 1776 by a man named Adam Weishaupt. Weishaupt was a professor of canon law and philosophy, a man disillusioned by the grip of religious dogma and authoritarian rule. His vision for the Illuminati was radical for its time, an intellectual movement of thinkers who would promote reason, science, and freedom from oppressive institutions. They called themselves the Enlightened Ones, and their goal was to illuminate the path to a freer, more just society. But as Sarah dug deeper, she began to uncover accounts that painted a much darker picture of the group's evolution. The Illuminati of Weishaupt's time had, according to these theories, become corrupted. Its noble ideals gave way to a hunger for influence and control. Some claimed the group had infiltrated powerful institutions, governments, banks, religious organizations, not to reform them, but to manipulate them from within. This wasn't just a society of intellectuals anymore. It was, if the conspiracy held any truth, a shadow government shaping the world to its will. As Sarah delved deeper into her research, she began to notice patterns. There were recurring symbols, the all-seeing eye, the pyramid, the number 13, appearing in places that seemed almost deliberately mundane. She found these motifs in the design of the US dollar bill, with its iconic eye atop an unfinished pyramid accompanied by the words Annuit Coeptes and Novus Ordo Seclorum. New order of the ages, she thought, tracing the Latin with her finger. Was it really just an artistic choice, or was it a hidden message? Sarah began to see these symbols everywhere. Pop culture was teeming with them, tucked into the corners of music videos, subtly woven into the lyrics of songs, and even hinted. That in blockbuster motion pictures, a renowned vocalist forming their hands into a triangular shape during a live performance, a fleeting glimpse of an eye embedded within an otherwise unrelated commercial advertisement, a stage design constructed in the distinct form of a pyramid. It was almost as if the clues were concealing themselves within obvious vision. Initially, she rejected them as mere coincidences, but the more she discovered, the more difficult it became to disregard them. What impacted her most profoundly was the uniformity of these symbols across eras and mediums. How could something so precise manifest in both antiquated architecture and contemporary music videos? Sarah began to contemplate whether there was a calculated endeavor to leave these markers behind, resembling breadcrumbs guiding inquisitive intellects toward a concealed reality. One evening, Sarah determined that her digital rabbit hole was insufficient. The information she acquired online, while fascinating, was disjointed, frequently submerged in conjecture or outright fabrication. She required something more concrete, something anchored in history. Thus, she transferred her investigation offline, visiting her neighborhood library in pursuit of resolutions. The library served as a tranquil sanctuary, its barriers lined with volumes that appeared to bear the heaviness of centuries. Sarah wandered through the corridors, extracting books regarding covert fraternities, conspiracy hypotheses, and historical chronicles of clandestine collectives. Most of the material she located dismissed the Illuminati as a fable, a creation of overactive imaginations and a culture attracted to the theatrical. Yet concealed among the more doubtful tomes, she uncovered older texts that seemed to suggest something entirely different. These vintage manuscripts were not composed as whimsical fiction or contemporary reflections. They read like documentation, historical accounts of shadowy cabals and secret assemblies that predated Weishaupt's enlightened ones. One book, its cover faded and edges frayed by time, described gatherings of powerful individuals in candlelit chambers where decisions were made that would alter the course of history. Another referenced symbols and codes utilized by secret societies to communicate across vast distances, ensuring their influence remained undetected. These accounts were sparse and fragmentary, but they carried a weight of authenticity that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. The most intriguing discovery was a collection of letters reprinted in one of the books that purportedly belonged to a member of the Illuminati. The letters spoke of plans to infiltrate key institutions and manipulate public opinion. Phrases like "the masses must not know" and "the time is near" stood out, haunting in their simplicity. While the authenticity of these letters was debatable, they felt eerily consistent with the modern theories Sarah had been reading. As Sarah sat at a wooden table under the dim glow of the library's overhead lights, she couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The idea of the Illuminati as a puppet master pulling the strings of society seemed far-fetched, but the patterns, the symbols, the connections, could they really all be coincidence? She thought about the monuments and buildings she passed every day, wondering how many of them bore marks she'd never noticed. She thought about the news, the music, the movies that filled her life. Were they subtly guiding her thoughts and perceptions without her even realizing it? For the first time, Sarah began to wonder if she had already been a part of the narrative all along, an unwitting participant in a grand hidden design. And if that were true, who was writing the script? As the weeks passed, Sarah's obsession deepened, weaving itself into the fabric of her everyday life. She couldn't drive to work without scrutinizing the logos on billboards or storefronts, searching for hidden meanings in their designs. The triangle on one ad, she convinced herself, bore an uncanny resemblance to the pyramid on the dollar bill. Another featured an abstract logo that seemed to form an eye if tilted just right. She couldn't decide if these were deliberate choices by designers or if her mind was playing tricks on her. Either way, they made her heart race with equal parts fear and exhilaration. Music videos, too, seemed riddled with clues. One particular pop star, known for dramatic performances and bold visuals, made sweeping hand gestures that resembled the shape of an eye. As Sarah replayed the video frame by frame, she noticed subtle details. Symbols etched into the background props, a flickering triangle that appeared for only a split second, lyrics that seemed to echo the same message she'd seen online. It's all connected. Even her conversations with friends started to feel suspicious. During a casual coffee date, her best friend mentioned how everything feels orchestrated lately, a comment Sarah might have brushed off months ago. Now, it struck her as significant. Was it a random observation, or was her friend hinting at something more? Were they unknowingly part of the same puzzle she was trying to solve? Or worse, were they aware of her research and subtly warning her to back off? Then came the message. It was late, the kind of evening where the world outside felt perfectly still, as though waiting for something to happen. Sarah was sitting on her couch, scrolling through her phone with the TV muted in the background. Her living room was dimly lit, the glow of her screen casting faint shadows on the walls. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just idly flipping through news headlines and updates on her favorite forums. And then, without warning, her phone vibrated in her hand. The message was from an unknown number. Her first thought was that it might be spam, but the words stopped her cold. "You're asking the right questions. Be careful." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the screen, rereading the message until the words blurred. A chill crept up her spine as she glanced around her apartment. The blinds were drawn, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be outside watching her. She stood up and peered through the gap in the curtains. The street was quiet, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. A car was parked across the road, its windows dark and reflective, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She sat back down, her mind racing. Who could have sent the message? She hadn't shared her phone number on any of the forums she'd been visiting. Her research was confined to books and the anonymity of the internet. Could it really be a prank, or was it a warning from someone who knew exactly what she was doing? For a brief moment, she considered replying, but something held her back. If the sender knew about her research, they might also know more about her than she was comfortable with. What if engaging with them put her in even greater danger? Instead, she deleted the message, as though erasing it from her phone could also erase the unease it had planted in her mind. But the unease didn't go away. That night, as she lay in bed, every sound seemed amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional rustle of leaves outside her window. She couldn't stop replaying the message in her head. "You're asking the right questions." It felt like validation, proof that her research was leading somewhere. But then there was the warning, "Be careful." What exactly was she getting close to, and who didn't want her to find it? In the days that followed, Sarah became more cautious. She avoided the forum she frequented, afraid that whoever had sent the message might be watching her activity. She left her phone on airplane mode whenever she wasn't using it and started unplugging her laptop at night. Even her usual walks around the neighborhood felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling of being followed, though every time she turned around, the streets were as empty as they'd always been. Yet despite her fear, Sarah's curiosity only grew. The message had confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. Her research wasn't just a hobby or a harmless dive into conspiracy theories. There was something real to it, something that someone didn't want her to uncover. And as much as the warning had unsettled her, it also fueled her determination. If she was asking the right questions, then she was closer to the truth than she'd ever been. But how close was too close? And at what point did curiosity become a risk not worth taking? These were the questions that now consumed her, lingering in the corners of her mind as she tried to decide whether to press forward or step back from the edge. The following days brought more strange occurrences. Her internet connection slowed to a crawl whenever she tried to access certain websites. A package arrived at her door, addressed to her but with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with a cryptic message: "The truth is hidden in the light." Sarah began to feel like she was being watched. Cars seemed to linger outside her apartment longer than they should. Strangers on the street made prolonged eye contact before looking away. At night, she could swear she heard faint clicking sounds on her phone line, as if someone was listening in. Despite the fear, she couldn't stop. If anything, the strange events only fueled her determination. She spent hours poring over old documents, looking for connections, for anything that could explain what was happening. And slowly, she began to piece together a narrative. The Illuminati, she learned, wasn't just a group of intellectuals or an idea from the past. It was, according to the theory, an intricate web of influence that spanned centuries. It wasn't about controlling governments or manipulating markets. It was about shaping reality itself. The symbols, the patterns, the coincidences, they weren't mistakes. They were messages, breadcrumbs left for those who were willing to see. One night, Sarah stumbled upon a forum thread that claimed to reveal the structure of the Illuminati. It described a hierarchy with powerful figures at the top and layers of secrecy below. The thread linked to an encrypted document, supposedly a leaked manifesto. Sarah hesitated. Downloading the file felt like crossing a line, like stepping into territory she couldn't return from. But her curiosity won out. As she read the document, her screen filled with phrases that sent chills down her spine. It spoke of the Great Plan, a vision of a unified world where chaos was eliminated, but at the cost of individual freedom. The document was filled with references to historical events, implying that the Illuminati had been behind revolutions, wars, and even technological advancements. It was too detailed, too specific to be easily dismissed. Sarah leaned back in her chair, the weight of what she'd read settling over her. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Was the Illuminati real, or was she simply connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected? As she stared at the glowing screen, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something vast and incomprehensible. Thank you for joining us tonight on Sleep Theories. This is just the beginning of Sarah's journey into the unknown, and will continue to explore her story in future episodes. May this tale of secrets and shadows inspire you to reflect, to wonder, and to dream. Sleep well, and let your imagination carry you to places where the mysteries of the world unfold. Sweet dreams. It commenced on an unremarkable daytime for Daniel, a youthful software architect possessing a talent for resolving puzzles. His existence was organized and foreseeable. Mornings dedicated to programming, afternoons diagnosing issues, and evenings engaging in electronic gaming. However, one evening, something altered. As Daniel rested at his workstation, the murmur of his computational device filling the chamber, he encountered a hypothesis he had perceived previously but had never genuinely contemplated: the simulation hypothesis. The concept was not novel. Philosophers, scientists, and technology enthusiasts had debated it for years. The premise was simple yet profound. What if the environment surrounding us was not authentic? What if everything, every tree, every cloud, every person, was a component of a highly sophisticated computer simulation? Daniel had continuously rejected the notion as science fiction, the substance of films and novels. But tonight, something regarding it resonated. He initiated reading obsessively, diving into articles, forums, and even academic papers. The theory was grounded in logic, with prominent figures like Elon Musk and Nick Bostrom lending it credibility. Bostrom's argument was particularly compelling. If humanity ever reached a point where it could create hyper-realistic simulations, it was likely that countless simulated worlds would be created. Statistically, the odds of living in the one base reality were slim. Most likely, we were already in a simulation. At first, Daniel laughed it off, but the more he read, the harder it became to ignore. Strange memories surfaced, moments from his past that didn't quite add up. A childhood friend he could remember vividly one day seemed like a distant blur the next. Patterns began to emerge in the world around him. Coincidences that felt too perfect. Glitches that he had previously chalked up to his imagination. One night, Daniel decided to test the theory for himself. It had been weeks of consuming forum posts, articles, and late-night podcasts about the simulation hypothesis. The idea had started as a passing curiosity, but now it gripped him, gnawed at the edges of his perception, and made him question the very ground beneath his feet. If reality was as structured and artificial as the theory suggested, there had to be a way to prove it, or at least glimpse behind the curtain. He sat at his desk, illuminated by the glow of his computer screen, and began writing a simple program. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a piece of code designed to generate random numbers. The logic was straightforward. The output should be completely unpredictable. Yet, as he stared at the rows of numbers that scrolled across the screen, he noticed something unsettling. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. A number here, a number there. Repeating after a few cycles, he rubbed his eyes, convinced he was imagining things, but the more he watched, the clearer the pattern became. Every few intervals, the same sequence appeared like a song stuck on loop. The numbers weren't random at all. It was as if an invisible hand was guiding them, injecting order where there should have been chaos. Daniel's heart raced. He ran the program again, tweaking variables, trying different algorithms. Yet no matter how he adjusted the parameters, the pattern remained. It was subtle but undeniable. It felt deliberate, like someone or something wanted him to notice. And that was only the beginning. Once Daniel began paying attention, the glitches seemed to follow him everywhere. Lights in his apartment flickered without warning, even though his landlord had just installed new fixtures. Objects on his desk seemed to shift position when he wasn't looking. His coffee mug moved slightly to the left. A pen rolled a few inches away from where he'd placed it. He told himself he was imagining things, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. The strangest moments happened when he ventured outside. On his usual walk to the park, he began to notice strangers behaving oddly. One day, a man in a dark coat walked past him, muttering to himself. Daniel didn't think much of it until later, when he saw the same man again, walking in the exact same way, muttering the exact same words. It wasn't déjà vu. It was like a scene repeating in a poorly rendered video game. And then there was the bird. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind Daniel usually enjoyed. He sat on a park bench sipping coffee when he saw a sparrow dart across the sky. It was an ordinary sight, but halfway through its flight, the bird froze. It wasn't slowing down or adjusting its path. It was frozen in midair, its wings caught in an unnatural pause. Daniel blinked, his heart pounding. A second later, the bird resumed its flight as if nothing had happened. He stood up, his coffee forgotten, and scanned the park. No one else seemed to notice. Parents pushed strollers, joggers passed by, and kids chased each other near the swings. To them, the world was moving as it always had. But to Daniel, something was wrong. The bird's pause had lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was enough to shatter his sense of normalcy. He began to see these glitches everywhere. A car parked on the street blinked out of existence for a moment, only to reappear in the same spot as if nothing had happened. Digital clocks glitched, showing impossible times, 4:73 a.m. or 25:01 p.m., before correcting themselves. Even conversations with strangers felt scripted. The cashier at the grocery store repeated the same phrase twice, word for word, with the same intonation and rhythm, as though she had been reset mid-sentence. Daniel couldn't escape the feeling that the world around him was unraveling. Or perhaps it wasn't unraveling. It was revealing itself layer by layer, as if daring him to dig deeper. As weeks passed, Daniel's obsession consumed him like a fire spreading through dry wood. What had started as a casual curiosity about simulation theory had evolved into an all-encompassing fixation. His one-stidey apartment now resembled a war room, walls covered in hastily scribbled notes, strings of red yarn connecting photographs and diagrams, and stacks of open books teetering precariously on every available surface. The soft glow of computer screens illuminated the chaos, their hum a constant background noise as Daniel delved deeper into his quest for answers. Friends had stopped reaching out, their texts and calls ignored until they dwindled into silence. Daniel barely noticed. His world had narrowed to a singular purpose, to prove that reality was not what it seemed. Days and nights blurred together as he scoured the internet for clues, digging through obscure forums, listening to late-night podcasts, and watching grainy videos of supposed glitches in the Matrix. He wasn't just exploring anymore. He was hunting, desperate for something tangible, something irrefutable. And then one night he found it. It was nearly 3:00 a.m., the hour when the world outside seemed the quietest and Daniel's mind felt the sharpest. He was scrolling through a forum dedicated to simulation theory, its threads filled with a mix of wild speculation, eerie anecdotes, and the occasional well-articulated argument. His eyes skimmed past a post titled "Proof Hidden in Plain Sight" and then stopped. The author of the post, a user known only as Observer, had a reputation in the community for their cryptic but compelling insights. The post was unlike anything Daniel had seen before. Observer claimed to have found evidence of the simulation not in the form of glitches or anomalies, but encoded messages embedded within reality itself. The post included no direct evidence, only a series of cryptic clues and riddles, each one urging readers to look for patterns in everyday life. "They don't hide the truth," Observer had written. "It's right in front of us. Numbers, symbols, alignments, they all point to the same thing. Pay attention to the things you ignore. The messages are everywhere." Daniel's heart raced as he read and reread the post, the words resonating with a strange and unshakable truth. The messages were vague, almost maddeningly so, but they struck a chord deep within him. He began to notice them everywhere. The next day, Daniel bought coffee at his usual cafe. As he handed the cashier a $10 bill, his eyes fell on the receipt. The total was $4.42, an unremarkable amount until he noticed the timestamp printed at the bottom. 4:42 p.m. It was the same sequence of numbers he had seen on his phone battery days earlier, and it sent a shiver down his spine. Later that evening, as he walked through his neighborhood, he passed a billboard advertising a clothing brand. The slogan, written in bold, sleek font, read, "It's all connected." It wasn't the kind of phrase that would normally catch his attention, but tonight it stopped him in his tracks. The words seemed directed at him, as though they were a private message hidden in plain sight. And then there were the stars. Daniel had always been fascinated by the night sky, often spending hours gazing at the constellations from his balcony. But now even the stars seemed to hold secrets. One clear night, as he studied the sky, he noticed an unusual alignment. 3 stars brighter than the others formed a perfect triangle. It wasn't a recognized constellation. He checked his star charts, and yet it felt deliberate, like a signature left behind by the architects of his reality. The more Daniel looked, the more he found. Random numbers on receipts began to repeat with eerie precision. Phrases and advertisements seemed to echo his own thoughts. Even snippets of conversations overheard on the subway felt too perfectly timed, too meaningful to be mere coincidence. The world around him was starting to resemble a puzzle, one that begged to be solved. But for every clue Daniel uncovered, a new question arose. Were these patterns real, or was his mind playing tricks on him? If the messages were intentional, who or what was leaving them? And most importantly, why? The answers Daniel felt were tantalizingly close, yet the more he searched, the more the lines between reality and illusion began to blur. His once firm grasp on the world around him was slipping, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Somewhere, buried within the fabric of existence, he was certain the truth awaited him. All he had to do was find it. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching him. At first, it was subtle, a twinge of unease when he sat in front of his computer for too long, or the sense that shadows shifted slightly in his peripheral vision. But as days passed, the signs became impossible to ignore. His computer began behaving in ways that defied explanation. Files he hadn't touched would open on their own. Random error messages would flash across his screen, and his webcam light flickered on for a few seconds at a time, though he had never enabled it. Each new glitch sent a shiver down his spine. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was a software bug or malware. He ran scans, reinstalled programs, even replaced his webcam entirely. But the anomalies persisted, and with each one, the sensation of being observed grew stronger, like an invisible presence was scrutinizing his every move. Then came the night everything changed. It was late, well past midnight. The quiet hum of the city outside was barely audible over the faint whir of Daniel's computer fan. He had been sifting through yet another obscure forum thread, his tired eyes scanning lines of cryptic text when the screen suddenly went black. His fingers froze mid-typing. The room plunged into an unnatural silence. Even the gentle buzz of his desk lamp seemed to fade away. Before he could react, white text flickered onto the dark screen. The words were simple but chilling. "You're getting close." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His pulse quickened as he leaned forward, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of the message. He stared at the screen, half expecting more text to appear, but none did. He tried to type anything, but the keyboard was unresponsive. The message remained for a few more moments before vanishing, leaving the screen blank once again. He sat back in his chair, his heart pounding in his chest. Was this a prank? Had someone hacked into his system? Or more terrifyingly, was this a response to his relentless digging into simulation theory? The thought sent a cold chill down his spine. The message felt deliberate, as though whatever had sent it was watching him in that very moment. In the days that followed, Daniel's world began to feel more surreal. Conversations with people took on an uncanny quality. Friends and strangers alike spoke in clipped, almost mechanical tones, repeating phrases with eerie precision. The cashier at the grocery store said, "Have a nice day," in the exact same cadence on 3 separate visits. It was as though the people around him were following a script, their responses pre-programmed and devoid of spontaneity. Even the sky seemed unnatural. Daniel noticed that the clouds rarely moved, hanging in place like props on a painted backdrop. The colors at sunset were too vivid, too perfect, as if rendered by an artist with an overactive imagination. The air itself felt heavier, charged with an invisible tension that made his every breath feel labored. And then one fateful night, it happened. Daniel was sitting at his desk, staring at the blinking cursor on his screen. He had been trying to write down his thoughts to make sense of the strange events that had been unfolding, but his mind was a whirlwind and the words refused to come. Suddenly, the lights in his apartment flickered and went out. The hum of his computer died, plunging the room into an almost oppressive silence. He sat motionless, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. For a moment, he thought the power outage was a coincidence, a mundane inconvenience. But then, in the corner of the room, a faint glow began to emerge. It wasn't the warm light of a candle or the cold blue of an LED. It was something entirely otherworldly, shifting in color and intensity like a living entity. The glow grew brighter, pulsing rhythmically as it filled the room with an ethereal light. Daniel's breath hitched as he stood, his movements slow and cautious. Within the glow, he began to see patterns, lines of cascading numbers and symbols, shimmering and shifting like the surface of a disturbed pond. These symbols moved too quickly to comprehend, but their presence felt purposeful, as though they were the very building blocks of reality itself. It was as if a veil had been lifted, exposing the intricate machinery that lay beneath the surface of his world. Daniel's chest tightened, his mind racing with questions and fears. Was this the truth he'd been searching for? Was he witnessing the raw code of the simulation? Or was his mind playing tricks on him, conjuring visions from the depths of his obsession? Compelled by a mix of terror and curiosity, Daniel reached out. His fingers trembled as they moved closer to the glowing mass. The moment his hand made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, jolting him like a bolt of lightning. He gasped, his vision flooded with a kaleidoscope of images and sensations. He saw flashes of his life, memories both familiar and foreign. He saw himself as a child playing in the park, but the scene felt off, as though it were a recording played back on faulty equipment. He saw faces of people he didn't recognize but felt he should, their expressions frozen in time. Most disturbingly, he saw himself from a distance, not as a human being, but as a sequence of data, lines of ones and zeros stretching infinitely into the void. The experience lasted only a few seconds, but it left Daniel reeling. As the glow faded and the room plunged back into darkness, he collapsed into his chair, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. His mind raced to make sense of what he had seen. Was it a glimpse of the truth? Or had his obsession driven him to the brink of madness? In the silence that followed, one thought echoed through Daniel's mind. The world he knew would never feel the same again. In the days that followed, Daniel struggled to make sense of what had happened. He replayed the events over and over in his mind. The glowing code, the surge of energy, the kaleidoscope of images that had flashed before his eyes. Was it possible that he had truly glimpsed the underlying fabric of reality? Or had his mind, pushed to the brink by his obsession, simply conjured it in a moment of exhaustion? No matter how many times he turned the question over, the answer remained elusive. He began to move through life with a strange sense of detachment. Every moment, every interaction, every sensation carried with it the faint echo of artificiality. The world around him, once vibrant and full of life, now felt like a carefully constructed facade. Conversations felt scripted, as though the people around him were reading from lines they didn't fully understand. The sound of traffic outside his apartment seemed monotonous, like a looped recording playing on repeat. Even the city lights that twinkled in the distance felt calculated, their brightness too perfect, their arrangement too deliberate. Daniel spent hours staring out the window of his apartment, watching the world unfold below. He noticed details he had never paid attention to before, the way pedestrians seemed to walk in synchronized patterns, the way the wind rustled the trees as though following an unseen rhythm. It was as if the simulation, if that's what it was trying harder than ever to convince him of its authenticity. But the harder it tried, the more artificial it felt. One evening, as he watched the sun set behind the city skyline, a strange calm settled over him. The colors of the sky, vivid oranges and purples fading into deep blue, felt impossibly beautiful, almost as if they had been painted just for him. And in that moment, Daniel realized something profound. Whether the world was real or simulated didn't matter. His experience of it was all he had, and it was no less meaningful for being uncertain. The laughter of a child playing in the park, the warmth of the sun on his skin, the taste of his favorite coffee, these things felt real. They brought him joy, comfort, and connection, and perhaps that was enough. Daniel didn't stop wondering about the nature of reality. His curiosity was too deeply ingrained to simply vanish, but he no longer let it consume him. Instead, he began to focus on the things that grounded him, the friends he had neglected, the hobbies he once loved, the simple pleasures that made life worth living. If the world was a simulation, then it was a beautiful one, and he would cherish it for what it was. As he sat by his window that evening, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Daniel felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in months. The question of whether his world was real or fabricated faded into the background, replaced by a quiet acceptance of the mystery. Some truths, he realized, didn't need answers. Sometimes the beauty of the question was enough. Thank you for joining us tonight on Sleep Theories. May this story of reality and illusion inspire you to reflect, to wonder, and to find comfort in the unknown. Sleep well, and let your dreams carry you to a place of endless possibility. Sweet dreams. For thousands of years, people have whispered about a lost civilization, an ancient world that was rich, powerful, and far more advanced than anything humanity has ever known. This is the story of Atlantis, a place that many believe holds secrets capable of transforming the world. But Atlantis isn't just a legend. For some, it's a conspiracy hidden away by powerful forces who want its secrets buried forever. For those who believe in the conspiracy, Atlantis represents more than just a lost city. It's a symbol of everything that has been suppressed throughout history. The idea that an ancient civilization could possess technology, wisdom, and knowledge far beyond our current understanding is both thrilling and terrifying. What if the Atlanteans had harnessed the power to manipulate energy, cure diseases, or even travel across the stars? What if they had discovered truths about the universe that we are only beginning to understand today? And yet, despite the tantalizing possibility, Atlantis remains elusive, its true nature hidden beneath the sands of time and the depths of the ocean. This, to the conspiracy theorists, is no accident. They argue that powerful elites, whether governments, shadow organizations, or ancient secret societies, have worked to keep the truth about Atlantis buried, believing that such knowledge could destabilize the world's current power structures. Imagine the upheaval that would follow if such a discovery were to be made public. Industries built on oil and energy would collapse. Technologies we have only dreamed of could become reality, and the entire way we understand human history might be turned upside down. The very fact that Atlantis remains unfound only strengthens the belief that these powerful forces are actively suppressing the truth. The story of Atlantis, then, is not just a story of a lost civilization. It is a story of control, of how those who hold power might go to extreme lengths to prevent the masses from uncovering a truth that could change everything. The conspiracy doesn't just suggest that Atlantis was a real place. It proposes that what Atlantis represents is so dangerous, so revolutionary, that it must be kept hidden at all costs. The story of Atlantis begins with the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who around 360 BC wrote about an extraordinary civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato described Atlantis as a vast island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the area we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis was a civilization with unmatched wealth and power, boasting vast resources, advanced architecture, and knowledge beyond the understanding of other cultures. The Atlanteans, however, grew arrogant and morally corrupt, challenging even the gods. As punishment, the gods supposedly sent a cataclysmic disaster that sank the entire island in a single day and night, taking the city and its secrets with it to the bottom of the ocean. For centuries, many believed Plato's story was merely a legend or an allegory. But over time, Atlantis transformed from a mythical place into a real mystery, captivating explorers, archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists alike. The story grew as new theories surfaced, each claiming Atlantis might not only have been real, but might also hold answers to some of humanity's deepest questions. As explorers searched for Atlantis, they proposed countless possible locations. Some pointed to Santorini, a Greek island that suffered a massive volcanic eruption that wiped out a flourishing civilization around 1600 BC. Others looked to the waters off the coast of Spain, believing underwater structures found there might be remnants of the lost city. There were even more far-flung theories that placed Atlantis in South America, under Antarctica's ice, or in the Sahara Desert, where a strange ring-like structure known as the Richat structure, nicknamed the Eye of the Sahara, resembles Plato's description of concentric rings in the city's design. Beyond the search for a physical location, the mythological aspects of Atlantis have fascinated scholars and storytellers for centuries. In Greek mythology, Atlantis represents more than just a city. It's a symbol of humanity's reach for greatness and the tragic downfall that often accompanies it. Plato's account of Atlantis wasn't just about an advanced civilization. It was a tale of ambition, power, and ultimately divine retribution. In his dialogues, Plato presents Atlantis as a place blessed by the gods, particularly Poseidon, the god of the sea. According to legend, Poseidon created Atlantis by carving an island for his beloved mortal wife, Cleito. They had 5 sets of twin sons who became the kings of the island, dividing it into 10 distinct kingdoms. The Atlantean kings ruled over the people and were initially just, wise, and aligned with the virtues Poseidon embodied: balance, power, and respect for nature. However, over generations, the Atlanteans began to drift from these virtues, becoming increasingly greedy, corrupt, and hungry for domination. Their once harmonious society fell victim to excess, losing touch with their divine origins. This moral decline is crucial to understanding Atlantis as a myth. The Atlanteans' downfall wasn't merely a result of natural disaster, but was symbolic of divine punishment. In the ancient world, myths often served as warnings, teaching that pride and moral corruption would invite the wrath of the gods. When the Atlanteans turned away from their principles, Zeus, the king of the gods, called a council to punish them for their hubris. In a single day and night, he sent earthquakes and floods that sank the entire civilization beneath the ocean, erasing it as if it had never existed. This mythological element emphasizes the idea that Atlantis represents a golden age of human potential, lost to greed and arrogance, a recurring theme across many ancient tales. Some researchers have even suggested that the story of Atlantis draws from older myths that span multiple cultures. Similar tales of lost cities and sunken lands appear in the lore of other civilizations. The ancient Mesopotamians told the story of a great flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which has striking parallels to both the Atlantis myth and the biblical flood in the story of Noah's Ark in Hindu mythology. There are references to a great ancient city named Dwarka, which was submerged by the sea after a cosmic battle. These stories collectively paint a picture of a recurring archetype in human consciousness, a fear of losing everything to the forces of nature or to the gods as a punishment for moral failure. Atlantis also evokes the concept of a lost paradise, similar to the Garden of Eden in Abrahamic traditions. Like Eden, Atlantis is thought to have been a place of purity, wisdom, and divine connection, lost because humanity strayed from its original path. In this way, Atlantis serves as both a cautionary tale and a reminder of humanity's potential, a vision of a time when humans were closer to the gods, possessing wisdom and technology that have since been forgotten. In esoteric traditions and mysticism, Atlantis has taken on an even deeper significance. Some mystics believe that Atlantis was not only advanced technologically, but also spiritually. The Atlanteans, according to these accounts, were highly enlightened beings who had mastered forms of energy and consciousness far beyond what we know today. Some stories describe the Atlanteans as being able to communicate telepathically, access different planes of existence, or even achieve physical immortality. In these mystical views, the fall of Atlantis wasn't just a loss of a city, but the loss of a spiritual and intellectual height that humanity has not yet regained. For many in modern times, Atlantis has come to represent an idealized utopian society, a lost civilization that embodied humanity's greatest strengths and fell to its greatest weaknesses. It is both a paradise lost and a cautionary tale, warning of the dangers that come with power, arrogance, and the abandonment of moral principles. The story of Atlantis endures because it reflects timeless human themes, resonating across cultures and centuries, blending historical speculation with deep mythological roots. In the end, whether Atlantis was a real place or simply a product of myth, it serves as a powerful symbol in our collective imagination, a reminder of both the heights humanity can reach and the depths to which it can fall. But where Atlantis might lie buried is just one piece of the mystery. What really fuels the conspiracy are the claims of what might be hidden there. According to some theories, Atlantis was a civilization so advanced that it possessed technology far beyond anything we have today. Many believe the Atlanteans discovered a limitless source of energy, supposedly harnessed through massive crystals that channeled power across the city, energizing everything from their transportation systems to their weaponry. Others speculate that the Atlanteans had mastered flight, agriculture, and medicine in ways we still don't fully understand. If true, such discoveries would be invaluable to the modern world, and perhaps that's exactly why some argue the powers that be don't want us to find it. This is where the conspiracy deepens. According to theorists, there are powerful groups, governments, corporations, even religious institutions that know the truth about Atlantis and have been actively working to keep it hidden. Why? Because if Atlantis's secrets were uncovered, they could threaten the global power structure as we know it. Imagine what would happen if an ancient sustainable energy source were discovered, one that could replace fossil fuels overnight. Entire industries would collapse, and the world's economic order would be thrown into chaos. Some say that big energy companies, particularly those in oil and gas, would do anything to keep such a technology from ever seeing the light of day. The conspiracy stretches beyond just governments and corporations. Some even believe that religious organizations, particularly the Vatican, might be involved. Throughout history, the Church has guarded countless ancient texts and artifacts, many of which remain locked away from the public. Conspiracy theorists argue that the Vatican might be hiding documents that contain details of Atlantis's history or even instructions on how to harness its technology. If Atlantis existed and held advanced knowledge, it would call into question our current understanding of human history, evolution, and ancient civilizations. It might suggest that humanity's origins are far older and more complex than we think, perhaps even influenced by extraterrestrial beings. Yes, extraterrestrials. Another popular theory in the Atlantis conspiracy suggests that the Atlanteans were either in contact with aliens or might even have been extraterrestrials themselves. Proponents of this idea point to ancient legends from around the world, which tell of gods descending from the sky, bringing advanced knowledge to early human civilizations. Some conspiracy theorists believe that these gods were actually aliens who shared their technology with the Atlanteans. This theory ties into the broader ancient astronaut hypothesis, which claims that extraterrestrials have influenced human development throughout history. If this theory holds any truth, then Atlantis wasn't just an advanced city. It was a bridge between humans and otherworldly beings. But every time researchers get close to finding concrete evidence, something strange seems to happen. Some claim that underwater expeditions have mysteriously lost funding, that valuable documents have disappeared, or that independent researchers have been silenced. There are rumors of researchers who came too close to finding Atlantis suddenly facing threats, lawsuits, or even accidents. To conspiracy theorists, these stories aren't coincidences. They're proof of a deliberate effort to bury the truth. And while no one has officially confirmed the existence of Atlantis, modern technology has fueled new searches. Satellite imagery, underwater drones, and ground-penetrating radar are revealing more about Earth's hidden landscapes than ever before. Some claim that ancient structures on the ocean floor could be remnants of Atlantis, though these findings remain unproven. Still, every new discovery seems to bring more questions than answers. So was Atlantis a real place, an advanced civilization that perished overnight, taking secrets of unimaginable power to the ocean floor? Or is it simply a myth, a story crafted by Plato to warn of the dangers of pride and hubris? For those who believe in the conspiracy, Atlantis is more than a cautionary tale. It's a hidden chapter in human history, one that's been intentionally erased. And the fact that we haven't found it yet doesn't discourage them. It only deepens their conviction that powerful forces want to keep Atlantis's secrets buried forever. Whether Atlantis is waiting to be discovered under the waves or forever lost to history, its legend endures. And as long as there are those who believe in its secrets, the hunt for Atlantis and the conspiracy theories surrounding it will continue. But perhaps what keeps the legend of Atlantis alive isn't just the mystery of whether it existed. It's the tantalizing hope of what it represents. Atlantis stirs something deep in the human psyche, a fascination with lost knowledge, untapped potential, and the possibility of an ancient civilization whose achievements could still reshape our understanding of the world today. For believers, Atlantis is not just a piece of ancient history, but a blueprint for humanity's potential, a lost paradise that, if found, could open doors to discoveries beyond our wildest dreams. Some conspiracy theorists even suggest that Atlantis's secrets could include revolutionary technologies that we have yet to rediscover. The ability to harness limitless energy, profound medical knowledge that could extend human life, and scientific principles that could explain phenomena still unexplored. These theories weave Atlantis into modern discussions of everything from quantum mechanics to alternative energy sources, implying that a trove of Atlantean wisdom might lie buried beneath the waves, capable of catapulting humanity into a new golden age, if only it could be unearthed. And yet, for as many who yearn to find Atlantis, there are those who believe that powerful entities have gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. They argue that governments, secret societies, and powerful corporations have suppressed evidence of Atlantis to maintain control. To these believers, it's no coincidence that promising discoveries vanish or that funding for Atlantis research is mysteriously pulled. They believe that a world order dependent on fossil fuels, financial hierarchies, and centralized power would have everything to lose if Atlantis and the technologies it may have possessed were ever uncovered. Even more mystically inclined theorists claim that Atlantis holds keys to spiritual truths and enlightenment, suggesting that the Atlanteans had access to higher levels of consciousness or even contact with celestial beings. Some argue that Atlantis was a civilization that bridged humanity and the divine, with its knowledge guiding humans to higher planes of existence until that knowledge was lost, either through human folly or deliberate erasure. For these believers, rediscovering Atlantis could mean reclaiming a path towards spiritual awakening, allowing humans to reconnect with an ancient divine understanding of the universe and our place within it. So as modern technology improves and underwater exploration pushes into new frontiers, the question remains, will we ever uncover the secrets of Atlantis? Is it possible that sonar scans or satellite imagery might someday reveal a submerged city, finally proving Atlantis was real? Or will it remain forever shrouded in mystery, protected by the ocean's depths and the weight of millennia? Perhaps it's this very elusiveness that keeps Atlantis alive in our imaginations. It's a riddle without an answer, a dream that remains tantalizingly out of reach. And as long as Atlantis remains unfound, its legend will continue to captivate, a story of both human aspiration and the dangers of ambition. So whether or not Atlantis truly lies beneath the waves, one thing is certain. As long as there are those who believe in its secrets, the hunt for Atlantis and the mysteries it promises will never end. Ethan didn't remember a time in his life when he didn't feel out of place. Growing up, he was the quiet kid, the one who sat in the corner of the classroom with his nose buried in a book or staring out the window, wondering if there was something more beyond the confines of the world he knew. While his friends grew excited about parties, clubs, and futures mapped out in clean, predictable lines, Ethan felt only a creeping dread, an unshakable feeling that something was missing. He'd often felt like he was standing at the edge of something vast, a place beyond his understanding, and he'd wondered if he might accidentally stumble into it one day. His life had been ordinary, perhaps too ordinary, and sometimes he thought that was the scariest thing of all. He spent most of his free time chasing stories and curiosities, unexplained mysteries, urban legends, and tales of things that couldn't be. The Backrooms was one of his favorites. He first read about it on a forum late one night, an innocuous post titled, "If you're not careful, you might slip between the cracks and into the backrooms." The premise was simple, terrifying. The backrooms were a hidden dimension, an endless maze of empty, yellowed rooms, a place you could fall into if you weren't careful, disappearing from the world as you knew it. The idea left him with a chill that lingered long after he'd closed his laptop. To some part of Ethan, the backrooms didn't just sound like a horror story. They sounded like something real, a hidden layer of reality lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right or wrong person to find it. He even dreamed about it sometimes. His curiosity deepened into a quiet obsession, and he'd spend hours researching theories, reading accounts from people who claimed to have seen glimpses of it or felt its strange pull in the periphery of their lives. This fascination made him feel alive, but it also made him reckless. He began to wonder what it would feel like to slip between the cracks himself, to see if a place like the Backrooms could really exist. He'd explore abandoned buildings on weekends, walk the quiet, empty halls of his university late at night, always searching for something just out of reach. It became his ritual, a strange comfort that filled the gap he couldn't explain, that constant need to find something beyond the mundane. It was a normal Thursday afternoon, and Ethan was on his way home from a late night of studying in the library. He was tired, his head aching from hours of staring at his laptop screen. His thoughts were muddled as he waited for the elevator to take him down to the parking lot. When the doors finally slid open, he stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor, and closed his eyes, leaning against the wall for a moment. That was when it happened. With a sharp jolt, the elevator stopped, sending a shock through Ethan's body and jolting him upright. He opened his eyes, blinking in confusion, but there were no lights, no numbers indicating what floor he was on. Only a dim, sickly yellow glow filtered through the tiny window in the elevator door. Confused, he pressed the door-open button, hoping to see something familiar. The doors shuddered open with a creak, revealing a room, not the parking lot, not even the dimly lit hallway of his university building. Just an empty room with faded, peeling wallpaper and harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Ethan hesitated, peering out into the strange expanse. The wallpaper was an ugly, sickly yellow, dotted with tiny, unrecognizable stains, and the floor was covered in cheap industrial-grade carpet that looked damp in places. The hum of the light seemed louder out here, a grating drone that wormed its way into his skull. He felt his stomach churn, a deep primal unease settling over him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the elevator. The doors closed behind him with a loud clang, but when he turned around, the elevator was gone. Nothing but an empty wall stood where it had been. Panic started to creep in as he took a step back, then another. This can't be real, he whispered to himself. His voice sounded strange, swallowed by the space around him. He turned, looking around, but all he could see was a vast stretch of identical yellow-tinted rooms. There was no end in sight, only more walls, more corners leading into more of the same. He tried calling out, his voice echoing faintly, swallowed by the relentless hum of the lights. "Hello, is anyone here?" Silence answered him, thick and oppressive. With no other option, he started to walk, hoping that if he went far enough, he'd find an exit, or at least someone who could explain this bizarre place. His footsteps were muffled by the carpet, and the further he walked, the more the rooms seemed to blend together. Every corner, every turn looked exactly the same, an endless maze of empty, deserted spaces. After what felt like hours of wandering, Ethan's initial fear dulled into a kind of numb desperation. He began to feel disoriented, the sameness of the place eating away at his sense of time and direction. His throat felt dry, and he realized he hadn't seen any signs of water, food, or even another living soul. Just endless rooms and the nauseating stench of stale air. Then he saw it, a shadow flickering just beyond the edge of his vision, barely noticeable against the yellow walls. He froze, his heart pounding. The shadow was moving. "Hello," he called out again, his voice cracking. "Is someone there?" The shadow darted out of view, slipping around a corner before he could get a good look at it. His instinct was to run, to get as far away from that shadow as possible, but something compelled him forward. A morbid curiosity mingled with the faint hope of finding another human being in this nightmare. He crept forward, rounding the corner, but the shadow was gone. He continued down the hallway, the humming lights above creating a strange hypnotic rhythm that made his thoughts feel hazy and slow. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard a sound. It was faint, almost like a soft shuffling, as if something was dragging across the carpet. He held his breath, his heart hammering as he strained to hear. The sound grew louder, closer, until he could make out a strange, uneven rhythm, as though whatever was moving didn't have the same number of limbs as he did. He turned to face the direction of the noise, his eyes wide with terror. Emerging from around a corner was a figure, tall and impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long, too stretched, as though they'd been pulled like taffy. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were wide and empty, two hollow sockets that seemed to drink in the dim light around them. Its mouth stretched into a grotesque, gaping grin filled with rows of needle-like teeth. Ethan stumbled back, his hand flying to his mouth to stifle a scream. The creature tilted its head, studying him with an unnervingly calm curiosity, as if it were examining a particularly interesting bug. Then slowly it began to move forward, each step deliberate and unnatural, its joints bending at impossible angles. Paralyzed by fear, Ethan's mind screamed at him to run, but his legs felt like lead. The creature was only a few feet away now, its twisted form looming over him, filling the space with an overwhelming sense of dread. Finally, his survival instincts kicked in, and he spun on his heel, sprinting back the way he'd come. He could hear it behind him, that terrible shuffling sound as it followed, closing in with an eerie persistence. His breath came in ragged gasps, his heart pounding so loudly it nearly drowned out the hum of the lights. He took random turns, ducking through rooms and around corners, hopping to throw it off his trail. But no matter how far he ran, he could still feel its presence lurking just out of sight. As he rounded another corner, he stumbled into a different room. This one was larger than the others, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch up impossibly high, vanishing into darkness. In the center of the room was a single decrepit armchair facing away from him. He was too tired to question it, his legs shaking as he collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily. For a moment, he allowed himself to hope that he had finally lost the creature. But then a voice, a low, raspy whisper, filled the room, coming from somewhere near the armchair. "Why did you come here?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The voice was quiet, almost gentle, but there was something sinister lurking beneath it, a malevolent edge that made his skin crawl. I don't know how I got here," he managed to stammer, his voice barely a whisper. The armchair creaked as if someone was shifting in it, though he still couldn't see who or what was sitting there. "No one comes here by accident," the voice replied, a hint of amusement in its tone. "You wanted to be here, you're one of us now." Ethan shook his head, panic rising in his throat. "I don't belong here, I didn't mean to come here." The chair creaked again, and Ethan could feel the thing in it watching him, though he couldn't see its face. The oppressive silence seemed to press in on him, as if the walls themselves were leaning closer, eager to hear what he had to say. "You belong here now," the voice continued, a strange warmth in its tone, like a parent soothing a frightened child. "The backrooms have chosen you, there's no way out." As the words sank in, Ethan felt a cold, hollow emptiness fill his chest. He wanted to scream, to run, but he was too exhausted, too drained by the endless maze of rooms and the oppressive hum of the lights. He sank to his knees, his mind racing, searching for some semblance of hope, some way to escape this nightmare. But deep down, he knew the truth. There was no way out. The backrooms were endless, a labyrinth of yellow walls and flickering lights stretching on forever, trapping him in their suffocating embrace. The thing in the armchair chuckled softly, a sound that echoed off the walls, filling the room with a dark, mocking joy. "Welcome home, Ethan," it whispered. And as the lights flickered above him, casting long shadows that seemed to close in from every corner, Ethan felt himself slipping away, the last fragments of his sanity dissolving into the hum of the fluorescent lights. He was home. After his harrowing escape from the backrooms, Ethan struggled to return to his normal life. He tried to convince himself that it had been a nightmare, the result of exhaustion and a wandering mind, but deep down he knew the truth. He'd been there, in that endless maze of yellow rooms, the echoing hum of fluorescent lights buzzing in his ears, the creature with the impossibly long limbs hunting him through every corner and corridor. He'd only narrowly escaped, stumbling back through an elevator that had seemed to appear out of nowhere and waking up in the real world as though nothing had happened. Weeks passed, but the backrooms haunted him. He saw glimpses of it in reflections, in dark corners, even in the university hallways that had once seemed so ordinary. He developed a hyper-awareness, a dread that every corner he turned would lead him back into that yellow, buzzing nightmare. His friends noticed his anxiety, his sleeplessness, but he couldn't bring himself to tell anyone. How could he explain something so surreal, something he could hardly believe himself? He was sure it would get better with time, but his dreams betrayed him. Almost every night, he would return to the backrooms in his sleep. He would wander through its endless corridors, its stale, musty air thickening with every breath. No matter how he tried to direct his dream, no matter how aware he became, he was always drawn deeper into the maze. And in every dream, the creature was there, lurking in the shadows, watching him with those empty eyes, that horrible grin. One night, Ethan jolted awake, sweat pouring down his face, the hum of the fluorescent light still ringing in his ears. His pulse pounded as he sat in the darkness of his room, clutching his bedsheets. It was a nightmare, just a nightmare, he told himself over and over. But the line between waking and sleeping was blurring, and he began to feel as though the backrooms were calling to him, beckoning him back. Despite his growing fear, something within him stirred, a curiosity, or perhaps a sick obsession. The fear of returning to the backrooms was tempered by an undeniable pull, a whisper that told him he hadn't yet seen everything there. He was certain it would swallow him whole if he went back, but some part of him felt he had to know the truth of what lay beyond those endless yellow rooms. The uncertainty gnawed at him, tugging at the back of his mind until he could think of little else. One Friday night, after another sleepless week, he gave in. It was as though he were possessed, acting on some deep, unspoken impulse. He found himself back in the library a little past midnight, with nothing but the quiet hum of the building to keep him company. He rode the same elevator he'd taken the last time, pressing the ground floor button, feeling the jolt as the elevator began its descent. But this time there was no jolt to stop him. The elevator smoothly reached the ground floor, and the doors slid open to reveal the quiet university lobby. Disappointed and relieved in equal measure, he let out a shaky laugh. He'd been foolish, he thought, to believe the backrooms could be summoned by something so simple. As he stepped out of the elevator, he froze. The lobby looked different. The lights were dimmer, the walls slightly yellowed, and an odd damp smell hung in the air. Slowly, his heart sinking, he turned to look behind him. The elevator doors were still open, but there was no lobby beyond them. Only the familiar yellow-tinted wallpaper, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, and that endless carpeted expanse stretching into oblivion. Ethan felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He was back. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself. This time he wouldn't panic. He would stay calm, map out a path, and find his way out. He'd done it once, and he could do it again. But as he started to walk, he noticed subtle differences. The rooms felt darker, the smell stronger, almost like mildew mixed with something metallic. And the buzzing was louder, a harsh, grating sound that rattled in his skull. He wandered through the hallways, taking mental notes of every turn, every detail he could remember. But the backrooms seemed to shift around him, subtly changing with each step, making it impossible to find his way back. And soon enough, he began to hear the faint, shuffling footsteps he dreaded. The creature was here again. Ethan quickened his pace, his heart pounding. The footsteps followed him, echoing in sync with his own. He glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of its grotesque, elongated form rounding a corner, moving with a horrible, jerking grace. He forced himself to keep calm, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way to escape. Room after room, he searched for a way out, for any clue that could guide him. But the rooms seemed different this time, as if they were trying to trap him. The walls seemed to close in on him, narrowing with every turn, the air growing thick and stagnant. The creature's footsteps grew louder, closer, and Ethan knew he couldn't keep running forever. Finally, he stumbled into a room that looked different, a wide, empty space with a single door at the far end, something he hadn't seen before. With no other choice, he sprinted for it, throwing himself through the door just as he heard the creature behind him, its horrible breathing echoing in his ears. He shut the door, his back pressed against it as he gasped for breath. The room he'd entered was dimly lit, quieter, the buzzing sound fading to a low hum. The wallpaper was still that sickly yellow, but the atmosphere felt different, almost like a forgotten place, untouched even by the back rooms. In the center of the room was a large rusted metal door unlike anything he'd seen in his previous visits. With a surge of hope, he moved towards it, gripping the cold handle. He pulled and the door swung open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. He didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, the door closing with a heavy thud behind him. The passage stretched on, the air growing colder, the walls narrowing until he could barely fit through. He squeezed his way down the hallway, his hands brushing against rough, uneven walls. And as he moved, he noticed something strange. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights was gone, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the faint drip of water echoing somewhere in the distance. He kept moving forward, the passage twisting and turning in unpredictable ways. The deeper he went, the darker it became, until he was stumbling blindly, feeling his way along the walls. His sense of direction was gone. He was deep within the back rooms, deeper than he'd ever been before, in a place that felt hidden, even from the horrors he'd already encountered. Finally, he saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. Desperate, he hurried toward it, his heart racing with hope. As he reached the end of the passage, he found himself standing before another door, this one old and weathered, with strange symbols etched into the wood. With trembling hands, he opened it, stepping through into his room, his own bedroom, dimly lit by the first light of dawn. Ethan stared in disbelief, feeling the familiar softness of his carpet beneath his feet, the quiet hum of the city outside his window. He was home, truly home. He took a deep breath, his heart finally beginning to slow. For a long moment, he simply stood there, letting the reality of his escape wash over him. The back rooms had let him go. Somehow, he had finally escaped. But as he sank onto his bed, exhausted, he couldn't shake the feeling that the back rooms were still with him, lurking in the shadows of his mind. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights, the stale smell, the creature's hollow eyes, all of it haunted him, a presence he could feel even in the safety of his room. And then he realized with a shiver that the room felt colder than usual. A subtle, creeping chill filled the air, seeping through the walls, brushing against his skin like fingers trailing ice. His breath fogged in the dim light, something that had never happened before in his cozy apartment. It was as though the warmth and safety he'd known here had been drained, replaced with the oppressive, stagnant atmosphere he'd left behind. Ethan sat up, glancing around. Everything looked normal, the posters on his walls, his desk cluttered with notes, the blanket he'd thrown carelessly to the side. But the silence was deafening. Outside his window, the familiar city sounds were gone, replaced by a dead, heavy stillness. He reached for his phone to check the time, but the screen remained blank, lifeless. His heart began to race as he tapped the screen over and over, but the device was unresponsive, a dark mirror reflecting his own fearful expression. Slowly, he became aware of a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a noise he tried so hard to forget, the low, ominous hum of fluorescent lights. It was faint at first, a murmur on the edge of his hearing, but as he listened, it grew louder, filling the room with that same mind-numbing buzz. Ethan stood up, gripping his bedpost for support as he scanned his surroundings. The walls of his room seemed to shift subtly, the wallpaper taking on a yellow tint, faded and stained, as if something had leached the color out of it. The air thickened, that familiar smell of mildew creeping in, the metallic tang that clung to his senses. His stomach twisted with a dawning, sick realization. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "No, I got out. But the room only continued to change, morphing around him. His bed stretched longer. The carpet rippled into endless patches. The door faded from view, leaving nothing but an expanse of yellowed walls and buzzing lights. The familiar furnishings of his room vanished entirely, swallowed by the sickly expanse. As he backed up, his foot collided with something soft yet solid, a familiar thick patch of carpet. His heart dropped, and he turned, dread curling in his stomach. The backrooms had found him again, and this time he feared it would never let him go.